looks about my size. Whose is
That's
this?
fine.
Whose was this? Do you mind if I
now.
take it?
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring it down here if that's all right. I'll try not to. Gosh, the last thing I need you to be doing is singing a song and then start singing another song. Of course, if everybody always laughs, I just make up the words as I go along. If I don't know them, I just make something up. It is awesome. It is really, really wonderful to be able to be with you. There's so many thoughts in my heart and in my mind as I stand before you today. First of all, thanks. Thanks for welcoming us. Thanks for welcoming my sweet princess. I will say this. Sometimes people say, Princess, she's not your daughter. I know she looks like my daughter, but she is not my daughter. So why would you call your wife your princess? Well, first of all, have you ever watched a Disney movie? And have you ever seen a nice queen? There are way too many people wanting to be queens, but every queen I've ever seen is always grumpy and upset and mean and cruel and angry. And she's not. She's everything that's not that. And besides that, if you've ever watched a Disney princess, they're always happy and they're noble and they're fun and they're likable and everybody wants to be around them. So I'm married to a fairy tale princess, is what I call her. And we are upside down, head over heels, crazy in love with each other. The other reason, just on the princess thing, is there's only one king. And I am not him. And he's the king of all kings. And so if I remember that she is his daughter, it's going to make a whole lot of difference in the way that I treat her. Men. That was a side note for all of us. And the other thing is, fellas, I just want to encourage you, pursue your princesses. Many of us men, we get the girl and then we're done and we move on to the next adventure, the next conquest. But fellas, we've got the privilege of pursuing our princesses' hearts every day. And I know that there's 5 love languages, but ladies, as I'm getting to know, I think that you all speak all 5 love languages. And probably all 7 dialects of each love language. So I've made it my goal to become proficient in 35 dialects of love language to pursue her. But more than I love her, I am upside down, head over heels, crazy, crazy, crazy in love with Jesus. I don't just love him because it's right, and it is right to love him, but I've fallen in love with him. And I have people call me different things in different places as I go around the world. Sometimes I'm called Pastor Keith. Sometimes I'm called Evangelist Wheeler. You get all these terms. And I don't know. Jesus never told me what I am. But I think, good morning, sir. Man, that's one of my heroes. But he's also one of the reasons that I'm always intimidated to come here. He was the dean of the seminary when I came here to Tulsa. And okay, so I'm going to be a little more nervous now. It's kind of like all of a sudden you realize the Holy Spirit is here. I just realized he's here. But I'm not an evangelist. I'm not a preacher. I think I've discovered what I am. I'm a Jesusologist. And a Jesusologist is someone who studies Jesus. And he's my passion. I dream about him. I think about him. I love to read books about him. I love to sing songs about him. I love to watch movies about him. I'm in love with him. And he's the reason for this celebration. And yet I think that as we come into this celebration, he would say, happy birthday. Happy birthday for what's happened here. And so I've come to celebrate. I've come to honor you guys and what you all have done. But I know it's not just been you guys, it's been a team. I love the fact that you're excited about Nepal. And it just thrills my heart to hear what's happening in Nepal. When I first went to Nepal back in 1993, there were 12 believers in the whole nation. And it was absolutely forbidden and punishable in severe ways to reach out to people to tell them about Jesus. In fact, as I walked for 10 days from Pokhara to Kathmandu, winding mountain roads, I met 2 believers on the whole trip. And one was a missionary from nearby India. And the other was a lady who had a vision of Jesus. And she and her husband and her 3 sons had said yes to Jesus. Her husband and 3 sons had been stoned to death because of their faith in Jesus. And to hear now that you all are building a church there is beautiful. It's fun to see how things come full circle. This wasn't part of my message but as I was sitting there, I was thinking about when I began carrying the cross, how foolish that was to so many people that I would carry a cross, especially to my mama and daddy. That's not exactly what you want your child to grow up doing, is carrying a 12-foot wooden cross around the world. And I don't know what they had in their mind, but I'm sure it was much worse than actual what I do. I think they pictured me with a bullhorn and a cross on my shoulder and barefoot with my children living in a park. And they never had seen it. We'd always been close, but once I started carrying the cross, they kind of changed their perspective about me. They didn't disown me, but things weren't always the same as they had been. Instead of calling once every few days, they called about once a month, maybe once every 2 months. It wasn't until, though, a few years went down the road, I think it was 5 years, and some local pastors in my hometown invited me to come and carry the cross and celebrate, and then we would have a big rally in our high school gymnasium. There were a lot of people there. And Mom and Daddy had to come out because they were involved in the media. They came out, and at the end of the walk, one of the pastors said to my father, "Mr. Wheeler, why don't you carry your cross?" Well, peer pressure works 2 ways. There's negative peer pressure. It gets people to do stuff, but there's positive peer pressure that gets people to do things. And this peer pressure caused my father to say yes. And he walked about 50 yards with me carrying the cross. As we got close to the high school, he said, "Son, I think you need to walk with it now." And I did. But he walked beside me the rest of the way. That night, as I spoke at my high school gymnasium, the bleachers were full. I was at center court. But I couldn't see anybody because they had a spotlight on me. I had the cross there. There was nothing else. The mic that I had was one with the tail on it. As I gave an invitation to say yes to Jesus, I couldn't see any movement. I could hear people moving to come to the foot of the cross. But once I could see inside that circle of light, the first person kneeling at the foot of the cross to say yes to Jesus was my daddy. And the next person was my mama. And I say that full circle. When God called you guys to do this, you didn't know what it was going to look like, and you didn't know the circle of the people, the influence that you were going to have. You had no idea of the impact that was going to be made in individuals' lives along the way. And I loved how you And let me just say this. This is twice that this has happened, where I've had to follow you. I spoke up in Tennessee recently, and it's just not right that I have to follow him in speaking. And just even that little bit was just so sweet and so blessed. And, but I had to follow him there. But so as I look at the fact that you guys started this and you had no idea where you were going. I look now and I hear each one of your stories. I watched the videos. We looked at the clocks outside. What a journey. A few years ago, my princess and I had the privilege of carrying the cross to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The hardest thing I've ever done. People say, would you do it again? Not unless my children said, we want to go with you. Or maybe Scott Burnett would say he wants to go with me. But it was cold. The food was the same every day. It's just bland because you have to eat carbohydrates to keep you going. You're sleeping in a tent on the ground, and that's okay, but you're on a mountain that's like this. So you're sliding to the bottom of your tent. You're wet. It's just, there's nothing comfortable about it. But you get to the last night, and as you look up, you see we're almost there. We've been walking 7 days till that time. We'd walk a full week. Every day you're walking. And it's not technical climbing. That's why we could take the cross up there. There were places where we would be on rock faces. Someone would climb up a little higher. We'd pass the cross up to them, and then I would climb up ahead of them. They would pass the cross up to me. But for the most part, you're just walking high, eventually over to 19,000 feet. But that last night, you begin at 11 p.m. And there's a reason that you begin at 11 p.m. Because it's going to be a long day and you want to summit as the sun is coming up. It's a beautiful scene as you look down on all of Africa from the highest point in Africa. But it's more than just you want to arrive and see the sunrise. Because as we turn and we have to go back down the mountain, now it's daylight. Because all night long we've been walking in the darkness. All you can see is that little bit of light where your headlight is shining on the mountain face. But as we turn around and we come down, we saw what we had just passed in the darkness. We had come past cliff faces and steep drop-offs, jagged edges, slippery slopes. There is no way that if we would have known how difficult it was, would we have begun the journey. And so often, God allows you to start something in the dark because if you saw how difficult it was going to be, you never would have started it. And by the way, our guide's name was Emmanuel. Never start a difficult journey without Emmanuel as your guide. So today I want to honor all of those who've prayed, all those who've given, all those who've worked, all those who have given of your life to this place. And the Bible talks about us remembering. The Bible talks about remembrance. In fact, there's a book of remembrance. But I want to say, like, when you began, God didn't call you to take a leap of faith. He calls us to walk by faith. It's not biblical to leap by faith. When you walk, and now I've walked more than the distance around the world with the cross. I didn't leap around the world. One step at a time. And this place didn't happen overnight. It's one step at a time. There's a scripture that says it this way. In Exodus chapter 13, beginning in verse 17, it says, "Then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that way was nearer. Because God said, lest perhaps the people change their mind when they see war, and they return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt." There was an easier way, there's a shorter way. And as we look back, the way that God led you all was not necessarily the easiest way that you could have done it. It wasn't necessarily the smoothest way. It wasn't the way without any obstacles. Because if you would have seen those obstacles, you may never have started the journey. Now you're supposed to remember what God has done. But here's the challenge. As you walk forward, you can't walk forward while you're looking back. We are to remember what happened back here. We are to remember the victories. We're to remember that God led us through the darkness, through the lands of difficulties and challenges. Even though there was another way that was nearer, God has led us. But you can't walk in a straight line while you're looking backwards. What has happened before is a memorial. And those memorials are to encourage us for the battles to come in the future. God did this to remind us that's nothing. Last night, my wife and I go to bed a little bit early because she likes to wake up about 3:30 in the morning. She likes to be with Jesus in the closet, and then she comes after about an hour and gets me out of bed. Notice I didn't say she wakes me up. I just get out of bed and we go to the gym. And we work out, and then I come back and I'm starting to wake up. So we go to bed a little earlier than most people. And there was a game being played on television last night down in Waco, Texas. I know some of you root for a team that wears orange, and some people root for a team that wears crimson. So those of you who root for the orange team might not know what the other team was doing last night. But I didn't know it last night. We just went to bed. It was a long day for both of us. We went to bed early. And then I heard a dog barking in our backyard. And frequently we have coyotes in our backyard. And we've had foxes. We've had a few other animals. And this dog was barking. And then all of a sudden I hear, "Oh!" And I thought, so I get out of bed. And we don't have a back fence, so I'm looking. I actually get out of bed and go to the door and open the door, and I'm looking out there. And my wife is looking at me. She says, "What's going on, baby?" And I said, "I heard somebody yell." Well, the truth of the story is for some reason, even though I didn't know the game was on, I remembered all of a sudden the game was being played, and I thought, I bet Oklahoma just won the game or scored a touchdown. I looked, and sure enough, they had just won the game. That's what people were yelling about. But when you're in a deep sleep and you hear, "Whoa!" especially when there are coyotes in your backyard and the other dog is barking, I'm thinking at first they're chasing them away. But there is an adrenaline rush when you've been in a deep slumber and you hear, "Whoa!" And so she says to me, "Baby, I'm afraid." And she's telling me, she's thinking maybe somebody has a gun in the backyard, because I'm not giving her much information because I heard somebody yell and I'm standing there, and if there is someone with a gun, I don't want to let her know. But then I said, Jesus is with us. I'm not going to die today. I said, I think it's a game, but even if it is somebody out there, I'm not going to die this way. There's another way. And so we start remembering the ways that God has led us. See, it was just a moment for fear in our life. It's one of those moments that just catches you off guard. And so it's a moment of fear. And the tendency is to make the darkness darker and what's ahead more intimidating. But so it's important to remember what just God has done. We carried the cross through the Darien jungle. And we're recounting this in bed. And they're saying, if you go any further, pointing to me, they said, they're going to kill you. And they're going to hurt her. And God led us through the Darien jungle. And you start remembering other stories and things that God has done. God's not going to let us stop right here. And I don't know what your moment is as a body, but there are going to come moments where it's, whoa! And it's unfamiliar. And so you step out and you don't know what's there. And then, I need to remember. But once again, you can't walk forward constantly looking back. Oh yeah, God did that. Oh, God did this. Because if you do, you can't walk straight. If you do, you're going to stumble over what's in front of you. On the same time, the Bible tells us, the Bible encourages us to look forward, to look ahead. There's a hope and there's a future for you. God has a destiny. God has a plan for you. And we need hope. That's what causes us to continue on. But the challenge is, if we look so far forward, as I'm walking with the cross down the road, if I'm looking so far forward, I'm going to miss what's right here in front of me and I'm going to fall today. So we remember, we look forward, but we don't focus on either one. God is with you in your past. He was with you in your past, but He's going to be with you in your future. I had a saying when I was a little boy, and it was, today is the best day of my life and tomorrow's even better. But the future, if we're not careful, can paralyze us because it's the what if. What if terrorists attack our nation? What if my political leader is not elected? What if something happens to the stock market? What if I get this disease? What if I eat this hamburger? There are people that obsess over those things. What if I shake somebody's hand and they're not feeling well? What if we're not careful, the fear of the future paralyzes us from doing what God has called us to do today. I'll never forget as we carried the cross into Libya. It was in the Arab Spring, the Arab uprising in 2010, 2011. We began in Tahrir Square in the midst of all the riots. We walked across the Egyptian desert and then up into the plateau of Libya. 3 times, once I cleared the top, the lip of the plateau, there's a little group called ISIS that some of you may have heard of. And they came to me. And they said, if you go any further, we're going to kill you. They came with a knife to my neck and a Quran over my head, my hands being held backwards. They were spitting on me. They were urinating on me. And each time, and it's a long story, God delivered us. In fact, I ended up spending the night in their home that night. But the next day, they take me back to the border and I'm walking in. And as we walk in, there's an array of tanks and countless gunmen pointing their guns right at us. And I'll never forget what my friend said, my friend David. He said, Keith, what do you feel? I put my arm around him. I said, David, I feel the glory of God. We're walking into the arms of Jesus. And I don't know what tomorrow holds for you. We are to look forward to it, but we're not to fear it. We're not to allow it to control us. And I don't know what it holds for you, but the fact is you're walking into the arms of Jesus because you're walking with the glory of God. So that brings us to really where we are today. Let me ask you, what time is it? Well, my watch right now says 11:56. But if I'm in England right now, that means it's, what, 5:56? I don't know if they have daylight saving time or not. So, but if I'm in Vietnam, it's 11:56 p.m. And you can do that with different time zones around the world. So the fact is, what time is it? There's only one right answer. It's right now. Wherever you are on your journey, it's right now. And this is what all that God has guaranteed you. It's all that God has promised you is right now. In 20 years from now, not all of us will still be here. I kind of hope that I'm not. I'm not suicidal, but I've been trying to give my life away for the last 35 years. You don't have to call 911. Listen, the fact is so many of us miss the moments that we're right here, right now. Do you know I've never been lost any place in the world, not in a jungle, not in a desert, not in a war zone. I always know right where I am. I'm right here. Now, here may not be where I was going, but I know where I am. I'm here. And the Bible says, a man's heart plans his ways, but the Lord directs his path. So you can have full confidence that as you take the next step, God is in this next step. As you lean into Him, and all you have is now. Remember the past, look forward to the future, but all you've got promised is this moment. And Jesus is here in this moment. A number of years I was beaten and left for dead. Some men attacked me with baseball bats and a 2x4, a metal pipe, and a sawed-off shotgun. You could see my skull from here all the way down here and across here. I was unconscious for 3 weeks. My first thought, my first memory, when I started thinking again, felt like God spoke to my heart. And I felt like He said, son, would you give me your dreams? Would you give me your vision? I said, Lord, you told me that young men and old men, they'll have dreams and visions. You told me to write down the vision, for it's an appointed time. You told me to run with the vision. You told me without a vision, the people perish. And I felt like Jesus said, son, I know what I wrote. Would you be willing to give me everything? See, sometimes we come with all our sin, with all our shame, with all our guilt, and God encourages us to bring all that to the foot of the cross. But then what happens if we're not careful, we get up a refined version of who we are. And then we do things in our own strength, with our own abilities, with our own talents, with our own giftings, in our own vision. So I said, as best as I can, Lord, I give you everything. And I felt like He said, first thing I thought He said was, it's about time. Then number two, I felt like He said, son, I just gave you a picture. You don't know when the last breath you're going to take on this planet ever will be. So you're not guaranteed your vision. But I want to be your vision. I want to be your dream. I want to be your purpose. I felt like he said, I don't want your vision to be any bigger than the next moment that you live. And I don't want your vision to be any bigger than the next person that you meet. Because if you remember what I said in my word, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done it to me. And you will find me in the face of the next person that you meet. I want your eyes to be on me. Abiding harvest. I celebrate what God has done. And I remember what God has done. But abiding harvest, I look forward to what God is going to do in you and through you. He's given you one of the greatest invitations on the planet. People pay thousands of dollars to sit on the front row, center stage, to watch sporting events, to watch musical events. And he's given you a free invitation to sit and watch what he's doing. But abiding harvest. Church family, may we never get so focused on what happened back then that we miss what's happening now. May we never get so fearful and focused on what we're going to do that we miss the moment that he's given us right now. Because this moment is Jesus. Moses, when he was on the mountain in Exodus 33, he says, don't lead us from this place if your presence doesn't go with us. And then I love what he says, because what else will distinguish us from all the other peoples besides your presence? It's not going to be the fact that you have a cool AH logo that just says, ah. It's kind of how you feel when you come in this place. Ah. It's not that it is abiding harvest. It's going to be a harvest that abides, that lasts. It's not going to be the cool t-shirts that you come up with, or even that you have a golden goblet that says 20 years. I actually thought you said Golden Goblin at first. That was the name of my high school football team, the Golden Goblins. I thought, wow. No, it's not going to be how well your team sang. It's not going to be how many churches you planted in Nepal or other parts of the world, or how many wells you drilled in the Congo. It's going to be what God has done. Because see, when your vision is Jesus, we become what we behold. And commitment looks like the object it's committed to. See, if you're committed to business, you'll look busy. You'll look like busyness. If you're committed to athletics, you'll look like an athlete. For years, I was committed to training up to 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. I could have lifted my shirt. Back then, you would have said, he's an athlete. I look a little more like a donut today because commitment looks like the object it's committed to. Some people are committed to their dogs. I don't know if they look like their dog or their dog looks like them, but it works. Some people are committed to ministry. They walk like ministers. They talk like ministers. They preach like ministers. Some people are committed to Christianity and to their church. And they look like their church. Because all they've done is focus on that and what they're going to do. And they just want to get their name out in the community. They're not as concerned with the image of Jesus, because in that moment they focused on him and his face. And when I walk into this place, every time, I see Jesus. Every time I'm with your pastor, I see Jesus. Every time I bump into Scott at the gym, I see Jesus. Guys, I encourage you. May Jesus remain as our vision. Remember, look forward to, but don't get stuck on either side. All you have is this moment. All you have is this place. And Jesus is standing in front of you. And he's still inviting us to come to him and to learn from him and to follow him. May we all stand.